Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Clear Perspective. I am super pumped for this conversation today because I have Dr. Laura Brenner here. Hey, how are you?
Hey, Allison, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm thrilled that you're here, and I have to start off just with the question of how are you recovering from your win of Dentistry's Got Talent?
Oh my gosh. I have to tell you that when I saw that I would get this big belt that Elijah made, this really cool, it's like what they give in the WWF, right? So I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this belt? And then I got that belt and I was like, I love this belt. This belt is the coolest thing ever. So yeah, it's been a bit of a recovery, but it's the best recovery. Like it's just been
Yes.
so much fun.
Oh my gosh. And so for any of those that are not familiar with you or don't know you yet, I think it was appropriate to start out with that because Dr. Lorena won Dentistry's Got Talent this year. I was judging that event and she crushed it. So let me introduce you to our audience so that they can get to know you a little bit more if they don't already know you. Dr. Laura Brennan practiced for 10 years before leaving clinical dentistry to become a blogger, a phenomenal speaker, and a certified professional coach. We actually got certified at the same place, which we found out when we were in Nashville together, which is so awesome. After her blog post, 10 Reasons Your Dentist Probably Hates You Too, went viral, she began connecting with dental professionals around the world wanting more from their careers. This inspired her to create Lola. How do you say it? Lolabees?
Lullabies. Yep.
Lolabees, perfect. Lolabees Career Coaching to help dental professionals design their career on their terms so they can live a joyful, balanced life. So amazing what you're doing in the industry. And I'm so excited to dive into some really important conversations today. And I always like to share with my audience like where we met. And you and I met, I think probably a couple of years ago at the very first Dentistry's Got Talent. And then I feel like we got to really sit down in this past Dentistry's Got Talent in Nashville and just really get to know and understand what we're both doing in the industry. I know, like expressed a lot of high fives, and we were like, yes, it's so important. And so, of course, I wanted to interview on the podcast because what you're doing in the industry is so important. And so, the first topic I want to dive right into is you practiced for 10 years before leaving clinical dentistry because you were burnt out. And so, I think that's something that a lot of people resonate with. I know I've personally resonated with this. How did you overcome burnout?
Well, that's a great question because you know, overcoming burnout, we would think that it's doing certain things to make our lives more balanced, things like exercise and taking care of yourself, stuff like that. And the way I overcame burnout was to quit dentistry. So, yes, shocking, I know. I was actually 3 years into practice and I didn't know I was burnt out. It was a long time ago. It was in 2004. And I thought that I just hated dentistry. I was 3 years in. I was really unhappy. I was depressed and anxious. The depression too, I want to point out, was I call it a low grade depression because I'm generally such an upbeat person that I was able to not realize that I was depressed. Like I was able to cope with it and stay positive. But it wasn't until years later that I realized, wow, there was this fog hanging over me this whole time. And so two things. I thought that there was no way someone could be burnt out in their third year. Like burnouts for people who've been in this for years, right? So that was one thing. And then the other thing, 2004, no one was talking about burnout, especially in healthcare. So I didn't know what it was at the time. I just thought I had to quit. And it wasn't until 2020, I was doing a talk at the local Colorado regional convention on burnout. And I started researching all the signs of burnout. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I felt in year 3 and then continuing on through to year 10.
Yeah. I mean, holy smokes, like what a realization after all of that too. So like, what are the signs and symptoms of burnout? Because I think like we have to understand like when we're feeling tired or when we're feeling stressed or depressed or burnt out. And like, how do you decide or like, how do you know what you're experiencing? Like, what are the signs and symptoms of like true burnout?
Yes. So I think one of the basic ones, like smaller ones, is that you just are a little more irritable. You're a little bit more annoyed, and I talk to a lot of other coaches now, or self-employed entrepreneurial types like you and me. And we always talk about how we burn ourselves out all the time. Because right. And so we just we love what we do. So we're doing it all the time. And what I'm finding personally now is I'll sit down at the computer to go through emails, and there's this I don't feel like going through these. So that irritability and that just lack of interest, right? But when we're looking at the serious burnout that you have in practice, there are a couple of signs that I think are really important. Well, a couple of things, you go into practice in the morning and you don't want to talk to anyone. And I used to go in and my assistants and hygienists would be like, "Hey, how are you?" And I was in my head, I was like, "Hi." But in my head, I was like, "Don't talk to me." And it wasn't until I got started with that first patient that I would get into the flow and things would be okay. But it's this trouble getting started on your day, feeling easily annoyed by other people and by the things you have to do. But the biggest ones are that compassion fatigue. So for me, my patients started to really get on my nerves, and I didn't feel that compassion, that empathy for them. And so in my head, in the back of my mind, I was always rolling my eyes, that feeling of just constantly rolling my eyes at them and feeling annoyed. And they felt like burdens. They felt like a burden to me. So that was me losing empathy for my patients. So that's the big one. The other big one is not being able to recognize where you've had success, not being able to recognize your achievements. And so I could do this amazing case, and instead of being like, "Wow, I've really just done something cool that has changed someone's life," I would instead worry about what was going to go wrong and dismiss the amazing thing that I just did and not give myself the acknowledgement that I achieved something really cool. So when you lose that empathy and compassion for your patients and you stop recognizing the good that you're doing, I think those are the two most important signs that we have to really watch out for.
And how interesting is that, where oftentimes when we are burnt out, or we're on the pathway to burnout, or we're doing the activities that contribute to burnout, it's almost like we feel like, well, I can't take a rest because I need to serve these people. There's so much I need to be doing to help these people. But in reality, we're not really helping them because we're not showing up at our best. If we're operating with a feeling of lack of compassion or lack of empathy, we really aren't serving the people that matter the most to us. So it's this bizarre, mismatch of the things that we're intending to do and the things that we're actually doing. So that's really fascinating. And so if somebody was listening right now and they were like, "Oof, that really just hit me in the gut, and I'm feeling that way," what would you suggest they do next?
Yes. And I just want to say, I love what you said, because it is about boundaries, what you just said. And if we can't take care of ourselves, give ourselves that joy and that happiness, we can't take care of others. So as far as the next, what would you do if you're feeling this way, is I would really get real with yourself. I've divided up two types of burnout that I've classified. This is nothing official. This is just my creative brain that
I love it.
I observe and I watch what's happening with people. And I learn from my burnout in dentistry and my burnout now when I love what I do, and how they're different. And I watch what's working for people and what's not. Right. And so if you can figure out, am I burnt out and I love my career or my work, or am I burnt out and I know people don't like the word hate, but let's just be real, right? Some of us hate this, right?
Yeah.
You're burnt out and you don't like what you do, or you hate it. They're two different things that create two different solutions. And it's just like in dentistry, they always say you have to find the right diagnosis so you can find the right treatment plan. So the next step is to find the right diagnosis to your burnout.
Yeah.
And then if you like what you do and you're burnt out, then you and I were just talking about going on vacation. Like going on vacations refreshes you. It helps you feel better. You're excited to come back and you don't mind. Now, let's be real. Everybody wants to stay on vacation always, right? Like it's still kind of hard to come home, but there's a difference between that and absolutely dreading coming home because you hate your life. You hate your everyday and you can't stand to wake up every day and go do this thing, right? That's the people over here who are burnt out and don't love what they do. So it's like the treatment plan for people who love their work but are being burned out is to take vacations, get breaks, take care of yourself, get support, someone else who could maybe take some stuff off your plate, right? All those things that free you up and they'll refresh you and you'll feel better. And that's what I learned. It totally helped me. Like we were just talking about, vacation helps so much. But if you're going on that vacation and 2 days in, you're already worrying and dreading, like those feelings, worry and dread and anxiety. If you're feeling that way about going back to your life, then you're probably over here in this other category. And that's where my solution is to stop investing more in this thing that you don't like, that's burning you out. Stop taking, don't try to do like more procedures with CE. Don't buy a practice if you don't already own one. It never makes sense to me. Like, oh wait, so I'm burnt out and you're telling me to invest more in the thing that's burning me out. That's right. So in this case, I would say invest in something different, which is for me, doing a side gig or hobbies or something creative. So that if you don't love what you do, then you're going to find other ways to get your engagement and your happiness.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I think there's a resistance to both of these things. And for both of those people, like there is a resistance to going on vacation because you almost feel like, oh, I can't, or I don't, deserve it, or I don't have time to actually go on vacation. And honestly, like just let's be real, let's be vulnerable. That's how I felt for almost 2 years operating in my business. I was like, I can't afford the time to go on vacation. Like that seems insane to do it. And you and I were just talking before we started. I just got back from my very first vacation. It was such a measure of success for me and my team. And I feel so much better. Like, you feel like rejuvenated and excited to come back to work. And you feel this like next level of energy. And it's so worth the time that you give yourself to rest and to just be a human instead of like be doing all of these things. And so there's that like resistance to even get there. But once you're there, it's like, okay, it's going to pay off in spades. But then there's also a resistance to give up the dream that you thought was going to be the ultimate. And especially like if you go and become a dentist, you put in the time and the hard work and, people are very much like, oh, wow, you're a dentist. And it's like how, I can imagine, and I'd love to hear kind of like what went through your mind when you were going through that, is like recognizing, realizing, being honest that this is not the path that you want for yourself and accepting the sunk cost of time to move into the thing that you're meant for. And I think that people have a resistance to giving up the things that they know aren't right for them, even though they know it's true. It's just like that, the ability to like have the sunk cost of time go into it. So I feel like they almost push themselves for longer. So I'd love to hear like your thoughts around that.
Yes. And the word resistance, what a great choice, because it's so true. It's like, we know, but we know in our hearts, but we're resisting it and we just don't want to go with what we need. And the way I describe it is because it's pretty inconvenient. It's pretty inconvenient to have to, invest all these years and money and your identity and all the perks and not just the money investment, but the money you're making. It's really inconvenient to have to let go of all of that, know? And so I think a lot of us do spend a lot of years sort of denying it. And I know you'll like this because you went to IPEC too, but intuition is so important. That intuition of, intuition is just a knowing based on our feelings, right? And so that when we say something to the effect of like, I know this isn't working for me, or I know I don't feel happy, that's our intuition telling us something needs to change. But because there's that resistance, we then say, But I call it the comma but. The comma but is when we get into our heads, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
I know I'm unhappy right now, but it's not that bad. Or I'm making money, or how else could I make money? That's when we get into our heads and try to, and it makes sense that we do that. We're trying to keep ourselves safe, right? Because it is a
Yeah.
huge investment, but it's like, it's not sustainable. At some
Mm-mm.
point, it just breaks us down. And if you're you know, there's two things. You one need the pain to drive you to say, this is bad enough that I want to do something. But on the other hand, you also need the hope and the belief that
Mhm.
it can be better. And it so can.
Exactly. And like something that I love to, ask my clients or even ask myself, like to be honest, because I think we're always aligning ourselves to our greater purpose or aligning ourselves to things that we want to do in our life is like, what is this truly costing you?
Mm,
Because we don't think about like, we're like, oh, but I invested this to get here and I put in all this time and energy. You can think of all the reasons why you should stay or not make that change because it is inconvenient. But then like the reality is like it is costing you something great. And we don't even realize what it's costing us until we're out of it. And we believe and we see that there's a bigger, brighter future for us. And so it really does take this like suspended belief, like we have to suspend our doubts and suspend our fears and really step into like a belief that our life is meant to be better than what it is right now, and good enough isn't good enough for me anymore. And this is costing me my life, which is too valuable to just stay in a place that it's comma but it's okay, and it takes energy to do that. And so when we're in the cycle of burnout, I think that can be really challenging. So yes, I think it's a place that a lot of people stay. And so there's a few things that I know you and I have like talked about before, and I think like anybody can resonate with this. I certainly do. Is the contributing factors to burnout of perfectionism, people pleasing, lack of boundaries. Like, how do you say that all contributes to staying stuck in that burned out space?
oh, yes. And this goes back to what you said earlier about how are we really at our best helping others? Like, are we really
Yeah.
helping them the most we can when we're not showing up at our best? And so there is a bit of this where we create this situation ourselves. And I don't want to, point fingers or blame anyone. It's more about responsibility, right? Because there's that fine line
Mhm.
between blame and responsibility. This is about responsibility. And when you see what are your patterns, that's when you
Mhm.
can get the awareness to do something about it. Because
Mhm.
we all get to choose. We all get to choose. And so if we are looking at perfectionism, for example, what I've found is people who are perfectionists, people who are people pleasers, those two qualities burn us out
Mhm.
really fast. Because what's happening is, a lot of us got into dentistry, no matter what role in the office or in the community, in the profession you have, we got in because we wanted to help people.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's this genuine care and concern for helping other people. This is so going to resonate with you because of our coaching backgrounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So there's this genuine care and concern. And because of that, we want the best for our patients. So I see this a lot it could happen with staff, like team members, it could happen with patients, right? So let's use the patients as an example. So let's say I'm a perfectionist and I'm working on my patients and something doesn't go right. I'm going to spend all night worrying about it. And I'm carrying that burden because I just want to help them. So it comes from a good place, but it's too much. It's like I'm taking on this role that I have to be the hero. I have to be the person who's going to solve all of their problems. They can't handle it if there's bad news. I have to
Mhm.
absorb all of that so that we can be, not have any confrontation. But it's it beats us down because and then that's why, so that's the people pleasing, right? I want to make everyone happy. I'm not going to let my patients get upset. So I'm going to do everything. So I'm going to be perfect. And if I can be more perfect, then we won't have consequences and everything will be
Mhm.
okay. But
Yeah.
eventually you're carrying on the burden. You're actually dismissing that this patient can actually handle if there's bad news or if something goes wrong. We are all strong, capable human beings who can handle what comes our way. So when we take this caretaker approach that comes from people pleasing and then makes us be perfectionists, we worry, we stress all the time, we have anxiety, we don't want to face, we avoid making decisions, we avoid confrontation, and we really end up becoming victims because we lose control because we don't have those boundaries. And so I would even look at boundaries from patients, boundaries from other people, from your team, you know, taking care of yourself, but boundaries from your brain that's going to go home at night and wake you up at 2 a.m. thinking, oh my gosh, the margin on that crown prep wasn't perfect. And then half the time it works out fine anyway, but you've spent all night awake worrying. And that's what's burning us out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, all of this resonates so much. And I love having these conversations. And they're so important, I think, to have these conversations because we can get into these cycles and just live this without actually asking ourselves, like, what am I doing? What am I thinking about right now? Why do I feel this way? And I think something that really resonates with me is that we get so burnt out when we're trying to be perfectionists because this is who we are and this is how we're showing up to the world. And that space in between is our pain gap. Mark Groves from Create the Love, I'm not sure if you're familiar, he talks a lot about our pain gap. And it's exhausting to be this person, but to show up in this way to make other people feel comfortable and happy. And the more we can reduce that pain gap and be ourselves, it takes so much less energy to just be ourselves. And the other thing that I really, it took me a long time to realize this, especially as a coach, because, when you start on your coaching journey, you want to serve people, you want to help people. What I learned was that not holding boundaries and people pleasing actually didn't help people. And so in practice, not being honest with your patient about the fact that they have periodontal disease, or not being honest with your patient that the work that they got, 7 years ago completely failed, even though it's hard for them to understand, it's still their responsibility. And we have to empower them to take responsibility for themselves, because then we're not serving them again. And so again, this is like another one of those things that we think we're helping, but we're not. Truly, at the end of the day, we are not helping, and we're hurting ourselves. And so how do you recover from perfectionism or people pleasing? Like, what are some of the strategies or tips that people can kind of go down a different path if they're listening and they're like, oh, this resonates. I am a people pleaser. I don't have strong boundaries. Like, where do you start?
Right. Well, I love what you just said too. So I had to just acknowledge that. And the idea of being yourself. I've talked to so many people who they don't feel like they're themselves. And I think the more we show up as who we really are, the better our relationships are with other people. So, so one of the things I think about is practicing imperfection. And so, if you're in the middle of a procedure and you're tormenting yourself because there's this detail you're trying to get at and fix, then you got to catch yourself and really remind yourself that it's okay to not be perfect. And when we create this ideal of being perfect, it's a lose-lose. Like there's no way, because no one's perfect, right? So we're setting ourselves up for something that we can never achieve, right? So then we're never feeling good about it anyway. But when you practice imperfection, it's actually acknowledging when things in your life aren't perfect and it's still okay. One example I use, right? So like a couple of years ago, I still use this story, is I was making a smoothie in my house and I knocked over the cup that had the frozen fruit and the water in it. And I hadn't blended it yet, but I remember being like, my initial reaction was like, I'm so mad, And then I was like, oh, well, actually, you made a mistake, like there was an accident and it wasn't a perfect situation. And so big deal. You put the fruit back in, you clean it up, and you're still getting your smoothie. So it's like noticing the times when things aren't perfect and they work out. And the more you notice that, the more you train your brain to look for that stuff as well. So that's one way.
I think that's like brilliant. And I think it also helps you move on faster. Like
Yes.
instead of like sitting there and being upset about your smoothie for the rest of the day, or being like, you know what, today's a bad day. It's a terrible day. Like, you know, you've heard those like things where people are like, I'm having a really bad day. It's like, well, what happened to allow this whole day to be a bad day? You can actually just move on faster. If you're like, yep, that was a mistake and it wasn't perfect, but we're going to carry on. It allows you to just continue to move and grow and then get into a better space faster.
Yeah, I love that. And you can turn it into a win too, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a perfectionist and I've just realized a situation where things weren't perfect and it still worked out. So it's more
Yeah,
practice, you know?
I love that.
So that's like a basic thing. I mean, I used to have to I worked with a career coach when I was unhappy in my career, and I would catch myself if I was trying to fix a procedure. I would get the awareness, stop myself, and actually have a mantra that I said in my head that was like it was something like, you don't have to be perfect. It was that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And it would get me to go, okay, so I'm going to leave this where it is. And at least I'm not risking making it worse,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, so, so it's really catching yourself. And then the other thing I think with burnout is starting to look at the win-win situations.
Mm-hmm.
So with the people pleasing, we are making sure everybody else wins, but it doesn't matter what happens to us. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're doing it at our own expense. It's very altruistic, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think as caretakers, probably even more so, if we factor ourselves into the equation of winning, I think somewhere along the way, some of us were taught that that would be selfish. Like, someone
Mm-hmm.
might think I'm selfish. You know, if you and I are wanting to meet for a walk somewhere, and I know one of us would have to fly at this point, which I would come to you, Allison, although it's not so bad here. I'm in Denver. But like, if we were to meet somewhere for a walk, and there were times when I would in the past feel awkward being like, well, will you come to my house?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to ask for what I want, because I don't want to be seen as selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think so many of us are conditioned to want to help the other person more. I'll go drive to you because I don't want to ask you to come out of your way to come to me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a silly little thing, but we make meaning in it. Right. So if we're thinking about in dentistry with our patients, it's like, we're doing so much for them. Can you do these extra fillings while we're here so that I don't have to come back? And we want to say, yeah, because I want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
But recognizing that, like, that's not the win-win. Like, so many of us think that, like, we're really in favor of the win-win, but what that really means to us is we're sacrificing our own win to
Yeah.
make the other person win. So really looking at what is the win-win. You have to win too. And that's
Yeah.
when you would say, I can't do this right now because then I'm going to work into my lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's really like redefining what is the win-win and starting to recognize how the win-win, that's not better for your patient if you work through your lunch and resent it the whole time.
Exactly. 100%. And I think it takes like that level of like permission. Like, you know, as somebody that is like, you know, a high performer, or somebody that works really hard, or somebody that's very ambitious, and somebody that likes to serve, you also have permission to take care of yourself. You have permission to give yourself a lunch break. You have permission to finish work at the time that you're meant to finish work. Like, it's all these things that we almost like you said, they're little things, but they add up to very, very big things. And I admittedly have been terrible at this in, you know, starting my business, working with clients. And actually, my assistant now, she tracks the amount of times that I break my own scheduling rules and why, so that I can look back and be like, oh, that wasn't worth it. It really wasn't. And I could have given myself more time to relax or to rest. And I think it's like reconditioning our mind to like, let us know these things matter. And in fact, you'll be better for it if you honor yourself first. And that's not selfish. It's actually a way that you get to serve better for longer in a more sustainable way.
Yes. I
I
love that.
love it. I love it. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because like
Okay,
I know like I will talk to you until like 4 p.m. today. And I need to
totally.
respect your boundaries and respect my boundaries.
Right?
And so lead by example here. I want to ask you just like your blog post, the 10 reasons your dentist probably hates you too. How did that change the trajectory in dentistry? Like how did that change your career? Like that's so exciting. I think that's such a cool thing that you did.
It was an accident. So it was really funny. I was very unhappy in practice. It just wasn't working. And I didn't know what to do. I felt stuck because we go into this to do this work, right? And we dedicate our whole lives to it. So I didn't know what to do. And I'll take a step back, Allison, and tell you that I entered this travel show host contest, which is so funny
Very
because at the
cool.
time I'd never spoke, like you've seen me now, I
Yeah.
speak, like I had never spoken, and I didn't know what to do. And my husband was like, look at this contest online. You should apply. All you have to do is make a 1-minute video and then submit it and you might win. So I was like, there's no way. I'm not creative. I'm not good on camera. I can't do this. But then I decided to do it. So I made this silly, funny video and it was so much fun. It like tapped into my creative side. And then when I didn't win, what was great about it was I had all this hope. I was like, oh, this is going to be so great. I have hope that I have options. Maybe I could win. It'd be so much fun. And when I didn't win, I was like, I have to do something with this. And so I was like, if I can't win this travel show host gig, which was like so out of reality, I was like, I'm going to start a blog. So I started blogging about food and travel, and nobody read my blog. And then what was great about it is it helped me open up my creativity. And then I started to see what was going on around me. And I started seeing that there were opportunities other than clinical dentistry. And I did have other skills besides drill and fill, And
Mhm.
so then I started a new side gig while I was practicing dentistry from blogging. Like that gave me the awareness to start the side gig. And then my side gig turned kind of into a full gig. And then I was able to quit dentistry.
Love it.
And then I saw this blog post, like right when I was about to quit, titled 10 Reasons I Hate the Dentist. And I was like, all right, like bleep you. I was kind of annoyed, but it was a joke. And so I was like, okay, well, here's 10 reasons your dentist probably hates you too. And it was a
Mhm.
huge joke. And I had no idea anyone would read it, but I waited till I quit dentistry just in case. Because it is all the stuff that we wish we could say to patients.
Yeah, exactly.
And I posted it and literally overnight it went viral.
Wow.
So what changed there was feeling like a failure because I couldn't hack dentistry, feeling like there was something, even though I was created something else, I still felt like there's something wrong with me. Nobody else feels this way about dentistry. I'm the only one. And suddenly I kept hearing from people from all over the world who were saying things like, wow, we feel the same way. How did you quit dentistry? So suddenly I realized that I'm not the only one. And that made me feel so validated for what I was feeling. And that was, I mean, it's still a healing process that you have to go through. It's still a
Mhm.
breakup if you leave your career and
Yeah.
switch. Even after you've left, there's still the grieving process you have to go to. So it helped me through that. And I started to see like, wow, there's something here and there are other people feeling the same way. And that was when I knew that someday I was going to go back and start a coaching business to help other people in dentistry who are unhappy with their careers figure out how to get happy either in or out of dentistry.
I love it.
So
It's
that's,
so
yeah.
so powerful. And I think it's so like again, it's like just being yourself, like being organic. Like you have like a brilliant sense of humor. And when you're just like you showed up as yourself and wrote something that was like funny but also true, and it allowed you to just like make this move forward and gave you this insight of like what next to do. So I absolutely love that story. And so if I would love for you to just share like the way that you're helping and supporting people in dentistry make that transition or pivot. Like, how do they get a hold of you? Like, what is the next step to kind of like find out more information on how you can help them?
Yes. So I have a Facebook group called Dentist Side Gigs. And because my whole premise is you don't need to throw you don't need to throw away everything you've invested. And the way other people have found other things to do if you're really looking for a career change is by starting a side gig.
Mm-hmm.
And people who aren't looking for a career change, when they start a side gig, everyone, I talk to them, they're happier in their dentistry because they have something else that's making their world more diverse and they're having more fun. So I help people start side gigs. And so the Facebook group is a great way. On Instagram, my handle is DR for Dr. DR Lullabies. And my website is lullabiescareercoaching.com. But if you searched for 10 reasons your dentist hates you, it'll come up right away. And so, yeah, I'm helping people start side gigs, and that's how people can reach me.
I love it. I definitely encourage you absolutely go check out her Instagram page. And if this talk both resonated with you in any way, if you know anybody that needs to hear this, or if they're experiencing burnout, definitely share this and go and find Dr. Laura Brenner and learn a little bit more about how she can support you if you're not feeling totally satisfied in your career at this point. And so I want to wrap up with our final question, which I ask all of the people that are on my podcast with a clear perspective, because I find that, you have such like a brilliant mind and such courage to be able to identify that where you were and what you're doing in this industry wasn't what was best serving you, and you made the decision and the pivot. And that takes courage, it takes strength, it takes resilience. You have to fight your own like internal battles, and you come out on the other side with a very successful business that's serving our industry and inspiring other people to do the same thing and to not settle. And so I absolutely just love what you're doing. And I'm curious to know, what is your measure of success? Like at the end of all of this, what mission and impact do you would be successful for you in your zone of genius?
Ooh, well, thank you for your kind words. And I will say that I love this question because I've thought about that. You have to think about this when you change careers. And for me, the definition of success is knowing that I'm finding a way to help others, but also fulfills me. Like I need to win. And so success is when you can impact others and impact yourself at the same time.
I love that. That's so, I feel like that's something that everyone needs to hear, especially in our industry. And like, again, like kind of back to like the permission of like, yes, like you absolutely need to win. In fact, it's selfish for you not to win, because that means that you won't be serving in this industry for long, because if you're not winning, we can't sustain this. And so I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight. Can't wait to see you back on stage again, and just, feel your energy and your aura. You're such a rock star, and thank you for everything that you're doing in the industry. And thanks for being on the Clear Perspective today.
Oh, thank you for having me, and right back at you.
Thank you.
I'm so
All right,
glad
guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.